Kanye West, or as he's now known as Ye, has apologized for a lot of vile things he said in the last few years, especially the anti-Semitism, but even the sort of like the Nazi uh, sympathizing or bringing up Nazism in positive light. Or even, I think for him, it was specifically even Hitler that he brought up in like positive light. He has now paid advertisement on the Wall Street Journal titled "To Those I've Heard," that was published on Monday. And today it's not a long one, so I think we can go through the whole thing. We'll read through it and we'll discuss why I think this is really a fair statement, and generally what to make of it and how to contextualize this in everything he has said. Welcome to the Daily Objective. I'm Daniel, and joining me today is James Valiant. We also have a super chat from Jonathan. Thank you so much. So, I mean, I want to just go into it, but James, do you have any just brief opening thoughts?
Well, Ye, or as he used to be known as Kanye West, has a lot to explain. I mean, when you go that far, yeah, you really, and if you do see that there were problems with it, it's actually, a good thing at some point if you acknowledge you said such things, especially the level of nonsense and truly disturbing things that came out of his mouth and certain of his associations. I mean, he has a lot to explain now. Um, Explanations obviously are not a moral justification. In a general way, I would recommend an article by Ayn Rand called The Psychology of Psychologizing. We really need to separate those issues out. A person's conscious volitional thoughts and actions are one thing. There is no justification or excuse, but on the other hand, there's no particular credit to a person's psychological state. But that might be a good way to set a context for all such issues. But let's get into the article. I mean, because it is quite a confession that he gives the world, which is actually, when you think about moral issues, the first thing that you have to do is acknowledge this and acknowledge what you did wrong, acknowledge the problems, and then we have to ask ourselves: is he providing just an excuse, or is he giving a real explanation and a true apology that shows at least the beginning of reform? Yeah.
We have a super chat from Bonnie. Thank you so much. So let's actually read it. So as I've said, this was paid advertisement for on the Wall Street Journal by Ye, and it's titled "To Those I've Heard." Starting 25 years ago, I was in a car accident that broke my jaw and caused injury to the right frontal lobe of my brain. At the time, the focus was on the visible damage, the fracture, the swelling, and the immediate physical trauma. The deeper injury, the one inside my skull, went unnoticed. Comprehensive scans were not done, neurological exams were limited, and the possibility of frontal lobe injury was never raised. It wasn't properly diagnosed until 2023. That medical oversight caused serious damage to my mental health and led to my bipolar type 1 diagnosis. Bipolar disorder comes with its own defense system, denial. When you're manic, you don't think you're sick, you think everyone else is overreacting, you feel like you're seeing the world more clearly than ever, when in reality, you're losing your grip entirely. And so, yeah, we can start with this one because I think this is very much what any type of mental illness is, right? Or at least I've never been in a situation like that, thankfully, and hopefully I'll never be. But at least from what I've seen from people who talk about it, or from seeing how it affects people, uh, it is really like you don't recognize it, right? I've always wondered, like, what does it feel like to, be schizophrenic or to get dementia, right? When you are in your, you are volitional, you are in your mind, and then you slowly drift into basically not being in control of yourself. I cannot imagine what that must be like. And in that regard, that's why I would make one comment. That's why I hate when people use mental illness as like a justification for why somebody else's ideas are wrong. Because the fact is, if somebody is mentally ill, you don't laugh at them. You want them to get help. That is not uh, like having mental illness is not like a moral wrong thing you did. That's why I mean one specific example. That's why I hate when like a bunch of conservatives call like trans people like mentally ill, right? If that is like an actual mental illness, you want them to get treatment in the best way that particular thing can be treated. You don't want to yeah, simply like laugh at them for whatever. You can, and I guess we'll go into later, if somebody knows they have a problem and they refuse to get the treatment, I think that specific thing might be sort of like morally culpable to some extent, but it's very contextual dependent. I mean, I would use one example from me, something that can be controlled. When one time I drank alcohol into the blackout drunk situation, right? Or maybe not necessarily blackout drunk, but I didn't remember much from that night. So the things I did during that specific period where I don't even remember it, I still did them, right? It's hard to like definitely like 100% feel guilty for it, but I did make the decision to drink, and then after it I am making a continuous decision to either drink again or to never drink again, and basically from that I never drank again. Now this isn't sort of like 100% comparable to mental illness, but even when you are out of it in certain times, during the time periods where you are in control, that's the moral culpability that matters. So, I'm James. Any
Yeah,
opening thoughts for this?
voluntary intoxication is really not an excuse, is it? Because you're getting voluntarily intoxicated on alcohol or drugs. And so you are putting yourself in the equivalent state of a psychotic. If you go to that degree of intoxication, and putting yourself to that degree of intoxication is when you do it voluntarily. When a person has a brain uh, illness, that's a very, brain damage, as he's saying here, that's a very different thing. I would distinguish, as most psychologists do, and I'm no psychologist, I just want to say that up front. I would say that there is, in my experience as a prosecutor and reading a bunch of crime reports and forensic psychology reports, there's a big difference between a neurotic, who has anxiety or depression and still in control of their mind and their actions, at least mostly to some degree, and a psychotic who's hallucinating out of it, really out of control, cannot see reality. I would distinguish, and that's a much smaller group of true psychotics. That is to say, my mind is not functioning. My volition is not in control of my mind or my actions to a certain degree. So I would distinguish between, most ordinary people who are just neurotics and dealing with some kind of emotional issue where they're still in control of their thinking processes and their actions, from someone who's psychotic. And, people who take like LSD or something, they're voluntarily inducing, in effect, a psychotic episode in their own mind. And that is, voluntarily, think about that. That's voluntarily putting yourself into a context of at least temporary psychosis. It's no excuse, but if you have a brain, say you're born with brain damage, some lesion in your brain or something, or if you're injured like this and it causes psychosis, that's not a moral issue. It's utterly not a moral issue. You didn't even voluntarily put yourself into a situation where you're blackout drunk or tripping on LSD. That is what, think about that. You're putting yourself voluntarily into a out of control situation. You are creating the danger in doing that. What Ye is saying here is that no, I had a brain injury and I couldn't even recognize that I was in effect out of control of my thinking processes. That's a very different situation, and it's not a moral situation. You can't morally evaluate a psychotic who's just hallucinating and completely out of control. That is, then the authorities kind of have to step in. You're a danger to yourself and others. That is what justifies the authorities coming in. You're now a physical threat. You're a physical danger. That's when the government is justified in coming in and restricting your freedom. It seems to me, precisely because you're no longer a moral agent. You've diminished your moral agency altogether, or it has happened to you. that you're in a diminished state of moral agency.
Yeah, and I want to bring up more things in that regard, but actually we can read a bit more because it provides more context. So continuing with the article, once people label you as crazy, you feel as if you cannot contribute anything meaningful to the world. It's easy for people to joke and laugh it off, when in fact this is a very serious, debilitating disease you can die from. According to the WHO and Cambridge University, people with bipolar disorder have a life expectancy that is shortened by 10 to 15 years on average, and 2 to 3 times higher all-cause mortality rate than the general population. This is on par with severe heart disease, type 1 diabetes, HIV, and cancer, all lethal and fatal if left untreated. The scariest thing about this disorder is how persuasive it is when it tells you you don't need help. It makes you blind, but convinced you have insight. You feel powerful, certain, and unstoppable. I lost touch with reality. Things got worse the longer I ignored the problem. I said and did things I deeply regret. Some of the people I loved the most, I treated the worst. You endured fear, confusion, humiliation, and the exhaustion of trying to love someone who was, at times, unrecognizable. Looking back, I became detached from my true self. In the fractured state, I gravitated towards the most destructive symbol I could find, the swastika, and even sold t-shirts bearing it. One of the difficult aspects of having bipolar type 1 are the disconnected moments, many of which I still cannot recall, that led to poor judgment and reckless behavior and oftentimes feel like an out-of-body experience. I regret and am deeply mortified by my actions in that state, and am committed to accountability, treatment, and meaningful change. It does not excuse what I did, though. I am not a Nazi or an anti-Semite. I love Jewish people. And so let's stop here. And I do want to bring up a story I had from, I think, November, where I was thinking if we should do an episode on it, but it seemed sort of like a singular thing. But it was basically Ye met with a rabbi, apologizing to him, sort of like asking for forgiveness and asking for forgiveness from Jewish people, and yeah, basically trying to remedy the situation to some extent he can try to do. Uh, that's why I am a bit more I'm more believing of this specific apology, because it seems to, not a singular instance, but more of a actually seems to want to try to remedy the situation, which again, oftentimes you don't see from people, even from people who, do bad things and, say that they've changed, right? But now we have Ye actually, talking to a rabbi, now publishing this. Um, Separately, something I want to bring up is the fact of he acknowledges what he did, and it has to be acknowledged, even if he did that during a mental episode. The fact is, he did have a Super Bowl ad where he advertised like t-shirts with swastika. He wrote a song called Heil Hitler where it included a speech from Hitler. Those things, and recently there was a story of a bunch of people on the right, like or the sort of people in the kind of like manosphere movement, like Andrew Tate, his brother, and a few other people like singing the song, right? So it has been used by anti-Semites. It has been used by Nazis in that regard. And he acknowledges that that cannot be erased.
When you see that kind of behavior from those of us, see someone, praising Hitler or using a swastika from the outside, what we have to do is evaluate it without any regard to what the reason might be that they are doing this. Is it a total evasion, mental evasion, which is a moral issue? A straight up cognitive, you're evading facts sort of issue, which is a moral issue, right? And you are responsible morally from a psychological, mental issue. We can't evaluate that. What we do is we evaluate the behavior. It is truly abhorrent to promote Nazism. Whatever the cause of that is speculation very often on our parts. Now, consider the people who are, if he's got thousands or millions of fans out there saying, cool, do all of them have, bipolar problems because of a brain injury? I doubt it. And so there must be, when you connect the dots there. So we've discussed this with other people as well, like, for example, Candace Owen, it's what is it now, time traveling Charlie Kirk, and flat Earth is debatable because she doesn't belong to the cult of science anymore, and when she says truly false, so disconnected from reality stuff, we can say that's utterly disconnected from reality, but it is really speculation on our part, whether it's clickbait or whether it's a psychological disturbance, or whether, is she being truly dishonest, or is she mentally deranged? That's totally speculative on our part. Well, what we are justified in saying is that the assertion is disconnected from reality. Those of us who are not in a psychotic episode need to say that is disconnected from reality. And we are perfectly okay in criticizing the assertions. Obviously, someone who's quoting Adolf Hitler positively, someone is obviously disconnected from a whole host of facts. We can say that it's wrong. We can say it's factually wrong, it's illogical, it's disconnected from reality, it should be dismissed by us in our consideration of it, but the cause of it is almost always beyond our capacity to evaluate or diagnose. We should bear that distinction in mind. If a person does voluntarily do something that they are in control of, then we can personally, morally evaluate the person. Morally evaluating someone that is a very difficult thing to morally evaluate an individual, and especially if they're going that far. As Ayn Rand put it, it's between them and their therapist in many cases, and it's really not relevant to our evaluation of what they've said. We can say what they've said is absurd, disconnected from reality. It implies something terribly immoral if it was acted upon. We can say all that. Now, when it comes to neurosis and people toss around the you're crazy because you have some disagreement and we're not in a psychotic episode, then we ought to be very, very careful. I can say things like, well, this person seems to be obsessed, with defending or attacking Trump. Now, if that's all you mean when you mean TDS or the opposite, right, then there's a difference between that, let's say, and really evaluating the person psychologically. You're not a psychologist. You haven't evaluated them. You haven't looked at the brain scans, which might be necessary. So the evaluation of the individual is often confused, and this is where it's really wrong. Confused between the evaluation of the individual and the evaluation of what they've said, which we can say. Is that obsessive? And what does that indicate about the logical operations of presumably, and this is what we can do, presumably a sane person who has facts available to them and their cognitive capacity to logically integrate that is still intact to some degree. And we have to kind of walk around treating everyone when they're using complete sentences, and they're not just, if they're using complete sentences, we have to evaluate the statements on that level. Without regard to what potentially could be going on behind the scenes. And I could say this about any number of people on the right and the left. I mean, truly, it's real. We have to separate out the individual evaluation and whatever excuse they have from what they're saying, because if what they're saying is absurd, and a person who isn't psychotic can say, okay, that's absurd. That's way over the top, ignoring basic facts that you have available to you. That's a non sequitur. It doesn't simply logically doesn't follow. You can't integrate those facts. That we can say. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I do want to say, because I mean, you brought up Candace Owens. The fact is, when it comes to Candace Owens, I don't think we have anything, nobody ever said anything about mental illness. I don't think there is a single example of anybody bringing up some diagnosis or anything. When it comes to Kanye West, we actually, we did shows on him a few years ago, and at some point we refused to do more shows, even when he did crazy stuff, mainly because, yeah, if this is coming from a bipolar disorder, what are we really commenting on? I mean, we are just commenting on somebody detached from reality, not in philosophical sense of somebody having completely corrupted philosophy, but like actual psychological state, right? And the idea of, Ye having a bipolar disorder goes back to 2016. That was the first time. I think in 2018 he published an album where he did explore mental illness. So we had these things for a long time, and now he officially said 2023 he had this sort of like hardcore diagnosis. Like now he actually believes in that, because even during the time he when it comes to his treatment, or even I think for a little bit he tried to deny himself that he had the bipolar disorder and said this is just some autism or something similar to that. I mean, this goes, I think, to fundamentally like how society treats even psychological illness. I mean, we have people in the chat talking about like mental illness is only relevant in legal matters as far as society is concerned. Saying I did it because I'm crazy is same as I did it because I'm a bad person, which I don't believe in. I mean, if this was somebody close to me, or if we are talking about his family, right? Do you completely disown a person who like does that? Especially like I think it's much different actually if it's like they are actually doing it or they have a mental illness, right? Um, like
There is
if
such
he
a thing as mental illness, and it is relevant to moral questions as well as legal questions. Absolutely.
and to
Now,
how you treat a person, right? If you
how you
have
treat a
like,
person.
yeah, if you have
Absolutely.
your parent like going down with dementia, you don't say,
Right,
well, okay, they are doing crazy things, so I'm just gonna like abandon them right now.
right, right. Yeah, exactly. And it would we treat a child the same way as we would, a 5-year-old child, the way we would evaluate an adult? Don't tell me it's not relevant, the condition of their mind. It is relevant to the moral and legal evaluations that we make of the person. Now, when a person makes a statement or a person does an action, we can evaluate, is that a harmful action? We can evaluate, is that a connected to reality statement? Now, that we can do regardless of it, regardless of the cause, let's put it that way. But on the other hand, when we have reason to believe that there's a mental illness involved, that should dramatically impact the way we morally evaluate someone, not just legally evaluate someone. No, it's relevant to our judgment of them as an individual and how we treat them. Absolutely. And there are many contexts like that. Um, uh, you know, would we, if we had a time machine and we could bring a caveman from, tens of thousands of years ago into the future, is his moral capacity, in effect, his brain, in effect, the same? Yeah, but would we even use that context to, let's say, in our understanding and evaluation of his situation, his psychological situation? We'd have to, even though that is, he's still got an intact brain, let's say, and his body works in a healthy way. Okay, we're still evaluate. If he's tried to club someone over the head, we'd still say, no, we got to stop him from clubbing someone over the head. If he said, the spirits are, in control of the universe, we might understand why he said it, but we can still say, no, the gods are not controlling this, and the spirits are not, driving the sun to rise in the morning. You can evaluate what they're saying in relation to reality. You can evaluate their behavior as being, destructive, harmful, or otherwise. The behavior and the statements can still be evaluated independently of our personal evaluation of the individual. And if they are in a condition where they're capable of self-harm and they're someone you care about, obviously you don't toss them to the side, you don't kick them to the curb. If you care about that person, if that person has been of value to you, you still give them the care they would need, just like you would a toddler who, a toddler might not know what they're, the full moral context of what they're doing and still run into traffic. We physically stop the child from running into traffic, don't we? That's the way I'd look at it.
Um, Somebody says this is a person. If Hitler was crazy, he's not as evil. I mean, to some extent, yeah. If like the idea of good and evil comes from the fact that humans are volitional beings. The fact that we have the alternative, we can focus on mind, we know what our life is about, and we can choose something that prolongs our life or benefits life or enables us to achieve happiness, or we can do something that goes against that. If let's say somebody like Hitler was in like a constant state of psychosis, which is hard to imagine for like a nation leader to like be in such a situation. We could bring up like example of Biden, which some people try to do, that Biden was not there like the whole time, right? So if the people who say that Biden like was out of it, let's say his whole presidency, you cannot really hold him accountable for almost anything he did if he truly was the whole time, like since the election until he departed, like was never like was never a volitional being basically, right? Then yeah, what are you holding him really account? You can hold people around him, right? Especially especially in America, if president is not capable of doing the presidency, the vice president can basically do like a gentle coup to remove, right? So we could like hold those people who are volitional and who could do something, but yeah, you cannot hold somebody who is not volitional, somebody who cannot like is not in touch in reality in psychological sense, like morally. We can still like judge their actions or like have a problem with their action. It's not necessarily judge actions is not the proper thing, but evaluate it, right? Like this
Evaluate.
action was bad, irrespective of what was the reason behind it.
If someone can write Mein Kampf, if someone can, run a country to the extent that Hitler does, we have no choice but to respond to, and his invasion of the Sudetenländer, Poland, his signing off on a final solution to wipe out all the Jews of Europe. We have to be able to evaluate not only the action, but if we're doing the separate evaluation, if he's that connected to reality and he's that evil in his actions, we can do that. Now, I think Hitler did end up eventually a paranoid psychotic by the end, and
But
I don't
even
think there are
there, we
people
would
who
probably
speculate
say, even
there are
there, we
people
could say self-induced, right? Because I think, at least my
self-induced.
understanding was
Well,
it
there's
was the
some people who
drugs.
say that maybe he had syphilis and it was the medical treatments he was getting from syphilis that were affecting his brain. I don't care. In terms of how we have to react the same way. We have to react the same way. That's why a head of state who's in charge of militaries and stuff, they have to be held to a high standard. And I don't really need to know the degree to which it's psychological or psychosis versus neurosis. No, 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 no. The action itself is, as I can say, for example, of a tidal wave or an earthquake, that is destructive of human life. That is bad for human life. We should take steps to protect ourselves and react to earthquakes and tidal waves, right? And even if they're totally psychotic, it's the equivalent of dealing with an earthquake or a tidal wave. This is just a horrible thing for human life. When it comes to a person who's able to put sentences together, we have to presume that they're in control to some extent. They're speaking incomplete sentences. Well, with Biden, sometimes he couldn't speak in complete sentences. And when it gets to that, you have to say, yeah, okay, I don't want my head of state to even occasionally be in a condition where he can't speak in full sentences. Yeah. So it is a complex matter, but we have to separate the issues. We really do.
Uh, let's let's take a look at more. So I ended. Let's see. So continuing with the article, to the black community, which held me down through all of the highs and lows and the darkest of times, the black community is unquestionably the foundation of who I am. I am sorry to have let you down. I love us. In early 2025, I fell into a 4-month-long manic episode of psychotic, paranoid, and impulsive behavior that destroyed my life. As the situation became increasingly unsustainable, there were times I didn't want to be here anymore. Having bipolar disorder is not a state of constant mental illness. When you go into the manic episode, you are ill at that point. When you are not in an episode, you are completely normal, in quotes. And that's when the wreckage from the illness hits the hardest. Hitting rock bottom a few months ago, my wife encouraged me to finally get help. Let me read a bit more. I have found comfort in Reddit forums of all places. Different people speak of being in manic or depressive episodes of a similar nature. I read their stories and realized that I was not alone. It's not just me who ruins their entire life once a year despite taking meds every day and being told by the so-called best doctors in the world that I am not bipolar, but merely experiencing symptoms of autism. So here we have a bit
Okay.
more of him. So,
If you're taking meth every day, you're doing it to yourself. If there are moments where you are lucid and you realized, oh, wow, I was really out of it, then it is morally incumbent on you to get help. Okay. So if there are moments where he says, I'm in control, those are the moments when he should be able to morally evaluate himself. And if he's saying that, we can morally evaluate that. He needed to get help. And there were lucid moments where he knew he'd been out of it. So now I need to get help. And then the other thing is wait a minute here, you're taking meth every day. Now you're doing it to yourself. It's like the voluntary intoxication situation. Now, if you have consistently bad behavior, it is a moral question. You have put yourself into a state where your judgment is disabled. Now, there I can evaluate your taking of the meth. You see, that puts you into the.
meds. No, are you saying meth?
Did he say meth?
No, meds,
Meth.
like
He
drugs
took
to help him.
meth every day.
Meds, like medicals.
Oh, meds. Right.
Yeah, yeah,
If
okay.
you're aware, okay, I don't care if it's meth or meds. Yeah, it's drugs of some kind. If you're taking those drugs and they are screwing you up,
Well,
then
supposedly meds for treatment of bipolar disorder.
then what you do, right? And if you're supposed to be taking, let's reverse the context. You're not taking the meds that make you better. Then I can again morally evaluate you. Why are you? Don't make me feel good. Dot dot dot. Well, then you need to get a higher degree of help. Right? It's those lucid moments that he's talking about that are the important thing. Did you take your meds today, as we say? If you don't take your meds that day, that is a voluntary thing you're doing. You're putting yourself back into that situation where you know you're not in control. And if that is becoming a problem, then step up the degree of help that you need, that you know you need. So once you confess to me, there are lucid moments where I'm not on my meds or I am voluntarily taking drugs. Okay, though that is a moral issue. But as I say, we need to separate out the individual evaluation from our evaluation of the behavior. I can still say the behavior, the statements he was making are wrong, disconnected from reality. Whatever the cause is maybe between him and his therapist. But once you tell me that there are lucid moments, I knew I was out of it. There were moments when I knew I was losing control and out of it and starting to hit rock bottom. That becomes a moral issue. You have a moral responsibility to attend to your mental health.
Yeah, although here I would still maybe I guess defend him a little bit because I mean he said 4 month long manic episode. I mean
Well, during
I've
that manic episode,
yeah,
uh,
but what I want to bring up specifically is I'm not sure if I ever was like I cannot imagine yeah, like doing something, being in like a 4 month manic episode, and then like coming out of it and realizing what I've done, and then, and maybe this was, in a sense, I'm not sure if like a wake up call or like now he got to the point where he really did realize everything he did, was able to, and now is
right.
on that sort of tour, right?
But
So yeah.
Daniel, when you come out of that 4 month manic episode and you realize those last 4 months were a manic episode, I'd cut a beeline to a mental hospital and voluntarily commit myself.
Yeah, because
What a
I'm
terrifying
wondering.
situation,
Yeah.
honestly, to be out of control of your mind to that degree. And if that's the case, I'm cutting a beeline to a psychiatrist's office.
Yeah, and that's fair because, as he said, once it comes out, there's probably like a depressive episode right after of like dealing with it. But yeah, when it comes to sort of properly dealing with it, uh, oh, some people were like sort of like talking about like treating him and that his apology doesn't matter. But I think it matters contextually. One, he's a public figure. He is a hero of many. I love a lot of his music. I think it's really great. I listen to it, so it does matter to me sort of what type of thing he is committing to, what type of thing he is doing. Now, after it was clear that he is mentally ill, I stopped like checking out what he posted today, right? Or it's not like I
Well,
checked out
look, I
every day,
generally
but
don't
I
go.
stopped. I stopped like whenever there was a story about him. I didn't go into it. This is a person who is not fully in control. I don't wanna like constantly follow somebody who is not there. And once he is out, and once he is saying that he is trying to really make himself better, I think it matters. I think it matters. I think it's important to have a public figure come out and say there are people who have mental illness, and that's an issue we should worry about. I mean, it depends to what extent, what he says about his doctors is true. Because if you take a lot of context about everything he has done, it seems like the way doctors have treated him, like kind of screwed him over, like not properly dealing with the issues he had, right? The original car crash, the fact that he didn't get treated for like mental issues. Then later when it came in that he was being convinced that this is not a bipolar disorder, this is just some type of autism, which again matters, right? If you have bipolar disorder, you need to get on meds, you need to get with a therapist, you need to like treat that. If it is like some type of autism, there is there, I don't think there are any meds, but there is still some kind of treatment of how to deal with that. But it's much different than like a manic episode. Like being autistic and like having a manic episode, like are much different in what you actually want to do about it.
Yeah, and this is, and celebrity doctors are notorious for how they,
Yeah.
appease their, high-priced clientele.
Yeah, I mean, what was the story? The California, the
There are a
girl.
lot of stories,
Okay, yeah,
but
fair,
in any event,
fair.
first of all, I don't mean to paint in a broad brush or insult any of
Yeah,
my artist and musician friends, but they're not my go-to when it comes to political, opinions. I just want to say that out loud. I mean, it is absurd to me that when at the Academy Awards in Hollywood, they make a big political grandstand statement. Why the hell should anyone care what some dumb actor thinks? Not that all actors are dumb, and not that all actors' opinions are poorly informed, but as such, they're not normally, at least, unless they demonstrate to me that they're very well informed and very rational, will I even consider the opinion of, I mean, frankly, why should I care what Albert Einstein, who may have been the most brilliant physicist in the world, thinks about politics or art? Now, it may be interesting for biographical reasons, but they're, I go to the correct expert for the correct thing. And, but also I evaluate my doctors. Are they giving me the advice that I think matches what my issue is? If I were, and I've never been in this kind of situation, but if I were in that kind of situation, and doc, that doesn't really, autism doesn't adequately explain what I've done. And if that's what I'm saying, the importance of those lucid moments, our first responsibility is to ourselves. And, obviously, and if the doctor is not giving us an adequate diagnosis, now I know it's difficult because the doctor is saying one thing to you and he's the doctor, but we should not, again, even if it is an expert in that field, I have a responsibility to evaluate whether that expert is giving me good advice, advice that seems adequate for the situation I'm in. Um, so, I've never been a big fan of Ye or his music, but it's not relevant to the extent that people are taking those opinions seriously, and presumably most of those people are not in some kind of psychotic episode. It's a dangerous thing. We all need to consider who it is that we're respecting, endorsing. Well, like you say, Andrew Tate, who pushes out the Nazi song that Ye comes out with. Wait a minute, is he have a brain damage? Is he on meds? Is there some kind of psychotic episode going on with him? Again, it's not for me to evaluate. you're promoting someone. Now, I would ask all the Andrew Tates out there, presuming that you're not in a psychotic episode, look now in a mirror really hard about how you promoted some guy who's now telling us that he was psychotic and out of it, and his opinions. You didn't need it. You didn't need it. Someone who says Hitler, was a great guy, or someone who's wearing a swastika. You've got all the facts in the world you need. You were wrong in promoting it. And if you weren't in some psychotic episode, you are immoral as a human being. And you need to take serious steps, and you need to evaluate your judgment as such. So, and all those people who associated with Ye, Nick Fuentes, all of them, if they are this side of psychotic, not being psychotic, then you need to look hard in a mirror over who it is that you're endorsing. And anyone, for example, who, and again, there's no indication, as you say, that Candace Owen has had brain damage. But so, wait a minute here, folks. If she's saying that, Charlie Kirk was time traveling, and I don't care whether she means it or not, it's so loony that you have a responsibility to say, okay, this lady's opinion is completely out of touch. And whatever the cause of it is, she's wrong. It's disconnected from reality. She's giving us really evil advice if she is in control of what she's saying, but in any event, it's very destructive and harmful advice. I can evaluate that without evaluating her as an individual. And so all the Andrew Tates out there, all the Nick Fuenteses out there, who were in effect enabling someone who's admitting that he was a psychotic, need to look hard in the mirror, presuming they're not psychotic themselves.
So we have more people talking in the chat. Somebody says if he wouldn't have suffered the consequences, he would not be apologizing. He didn't. The proof is that he didn't apologize until much later. But those things can be consistent. One, I think there should have been consequences, and there have been consequences. The Adidas dropped him. I mean, all the pushback, like when the sort of the DEFCON 3 or DEFCON 5 or whatever it was on the Jews happened, everybody went after him, right? That was a unified thing. Even, and it could have been like a manic episode, and still everybody went after him. Like he had consequences from it, and he should have felt consequences, right? Even if he wasn't fully in control of his action, the fact is that the harm was caused. I don't think those things go against each other, and the fact that there are consequences might push him towards getting a better treatment. Trying to say trying to say that this is like, I think it's to some extent ugly. The fact that people are saying this is like only like material thing. What if it's like a genuine, he wants a better life. Like he wants to like improve his life. He no longer wants to like go into like we are talking as if like that's like a desirable life. Like being in constant manic episodes, doing this like crazy anti-Semitic stuff to achieve what? I mean, like just a reminder, people like Candace Owens, whoever we want to bring up, like Trump, Candace Owens, on the left, AOC, like those people like probably don't live like a happy life. Stalin or Hitler, those people didn't live a happy life. There's nothing desirable about like being in that situation. If somebody, and I mean it when I say, I want to be benevolent and I want to give people chances, right? If I genuinely see that EA wants to actually fix it, and we'll read it in a bit, and wants to actually like become a better person, like for his own sake, like I don't even care. Like technically, he didn't do that much to me, right? I think he still did a lot, and to a lot of other people, but not necessarily to me. If he gets better, I want it for his own sake, not for, for some
If he
weird
doesn't
like.
physically act out on other people, he's in a different state, right? If he's just using word and song, that's one state. And that shows me that he wasn't completely, to some degree at least, out of control, because he wasn't, running into traffic or punching Jewish people just because they were Jews, etc. That tells me that there is a degree of some kind of control. But again, we have to separate those issues, and philosophy can, in effect, voluntarily even when we're not psychotic, accepting bad ideas and not thinking about them, being a mystic or collectivist can be a sort of self-induced mental illness, a self-induced detachment from reality. In effect, if you make up some nonsense, or if you accept some nonsense, I don't care how old and venerable it is, and I don't care if there were churches teaching it. If now, in the context of the 21st century, we can say, okay, demon possession, that, but they still believe, like Tucker Carlson says, I was attacked by demons, right? Let's assume he's a sane human being, okay, who's literally saying I was physically attacked by demons. And it was a philosophical change in his mind. I've simply taken my religion more seriously. Well, that's a kind of self-induced psychosis. It's not psychosis, strictly speaking, which is out of someone's control, maybe the product of brain damage, as we see possibly here in the case of Ye. But what they're doing, in effect, is volitionally, voluntarily using their mind. They didn't use drugs. They didn't, take meth or LSD or something, but just through the operations, the cognitive operations of their mind, they've detached themselves from reality. And those can have precisely the same consequences as if you had severe brain damage, which is a relatively rare phenomenon. Now imagine that. That's why it's so morally incumbent on us to get our philosophy straight, to be responsible in how we use our minds and how we think and how we stick to the facts and logic. Because if you step away from that, if you step away from the responsible use of your cognitive faculty, then you are in effect turning yourself into the equivalent of a psychotic. And in both cases, you have to suffer the consequences. And believe me, there will be consequences. I don't know when, I don't know where, but believe me, to the extent that you're detaching yourself voluntarily from reality through your mind, then you could have the exact same consequences of a severely brain damaged person. So it is for those of us who are on the better side of the psychotic line, it is really important for us first to get our philosophy straight, to get how we're thinking and what we will accept as true and false, what we will accept as a value, what is our standard of value. This is the urgency of philosophy, because in effect, and I'm going to just say it out loud, in the 21st century, for informed and educated people to become religious or be religious, it's a sort of it's the self-induced equivalent of psychosis, detaching yourself from reality. And you will suffer consequences inside your mind and easily potentially, in reality. You're free to ignore all that, but you're not free to ignore the consequences.
Just to finish the article, we just have a few more lines. So let's see. My words as a leader in my community have real global impact and influence. In my mania, I lost the complete sight of that. As I find my new baseline and new center through an effective regime of medication, therapy, exercise, and clean living, I have a newfound, much needed clarity. I am pouring my energy into positive, meaningful art, music, clothing, design, and other new ideas to help the world. I am not asking for sympathy or a free pass, though I aspire to earn your forgiveness. I write today simply to ask for your patience and understanding as I find my new home, as I find my way home. With love, Ye.
Part of that is really virtuous, I have to say. I disagree, obviously, with some of the implications of his, collectivist and altruist ideas that are sort of peppered in there and sprinkled in there.
Black community and
and you treating people in terms of groups at all is wrong and irrational. We can cover that in a different way, but forgiveness is only earned, and it begins by acknowledging that you did something wrong. And here he's saying, I really have to earn my way back. If I'm going to be thought of as a good, decent person, I have to earn my way back into the light. And that does not come automatically, but it starts by acknowledging I did something wrong. And the next step is, now I'm taking steps to correct it. I realize that I did something really wrong. Now I'm not acknowledging it. I'm telling to the victims, I'm sorry. I mean to correct my behavior. I mean to correct my behavior and make restitution where that's relevant and possible. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes what you did was so outrageous that you couldn't even turn to the victim and say, "Let me earn my apology." Yeah, you're too far gone. But if it's possible, you make restitution. You make clear that you're changing your thinking and your behavior, and you take steps to correct the character problem that was there in the first place. And here he's sort of admitting that it's a mixture. Yes, it was a brain illness, but I also did not properly attend to it. And here he is properly attending to it. He's now listening to his doctors, taking his meds, trying to live a healthy life. And it's especially important that I do that, given the way I behaved before. That is at least the way a moral person would go about correcting some error that they had made in the past. There's something, let me put it this way, there's something basically virtuous about the admission and about saying, I know I need to take steps and demonstrate to you before you forgive me. I need to demonstrate that I've taken steps and I'm correcting the situation. That is correct. Forgiveness shouldn't be given out like, Halloween candy. And it's not a question of your peace of mind. You need to evaluate the person. You need to evaluate their actions, whatever the cause. Maybe brain damage is part of the explanation. Nonetheless, wearing a swastika ain't cool. Quoting Hitler positively is really disturbing. And so I can evaluate that and dissociate myself hard. And you do no one any favor by overlooking that, forgiving that, just forgiving it. Think of it. You're not doing the person a favor if you just forgive without cause. They need to admit it, make restitution, and take affirmative steps to correct the cause of what made them go so bad. There's something about that I like. The way he puts it there is virtuous. Let me put it that way, in a generalized way, despite, like I say, some philosophical errors that I think he's still subject to. But the world is philosophically screwed up, so.
Yeah, somebody tries to say that he caused enormous damage and caused the anti-Semitism, like modern anti-Semitism that happened. That I mean, I'm sorry, but that's ridiculous. When
He's
when the
not responsible for anti-Semitism.
when the DEFCON 3 comment happened, he was dropped by Adidas, and every single person in the world disowned him. The wave of anti-Semitism came after October 7th. It was specifically because Jews are now defending themselves. Not to mention the fact that anti-Semitism has never really went away. It was always there. It's always present when you have an anti-rational philosophy, when you have anti-capitalist nature, when you have Jews actually standing up for themselves. That's when anti-Semitism shows its ugly head. I mean, do you mean to say that the Bondi Beach attack was caused by causally related to Ye, or the Washington D.C., the couple that was murdered, or the in Colorado, or even October 7th, right? The idea that was Ye's cause. I mean,
Ye
I'm
wasn't
sorry,
even
but
around for the Holocaust, okay? Ye wasn't around when Martin Luther and Karl Marx said rankly anti-Semitic things. It has been a part of Western tradition for a long time, so you can't pin it all on Kanye. On the other hand, he did feed into it. He did throw a log onto the fire of it. So he did not help the situation. He only made it worse. But as you point out, he suffered consequences from that. And that's why our moral evaluation of it is important. I'm not going to do business with you anymore, Ye. You're going to lose your contract. You're going to lose your endorsement contract. You're going to lose your recording contract. That is the appropriate conduct. We need to react when people do things that are wrong. I don't need to know the cause or the details, what part was psychotic and what part was morally chosen. I can tell you that swastika is so uncool that I'm not going to be your friend. I'm not going to sanction you. I'm certainly not going to do business with you. He did do harm in adding to, joining the chorus and the centuries-long chorus of anti-Semites. But he is hardly responsible for, the anti-Semitism that is all around us, there's lots of folks who are responsible for that. There are a lot of people who are, again, a mix of psychological problems and a mix of moral errors that is really an individual thing. It has to be judged individually. But if they're saying anti-Semitic stuff, we have to call it out and take appropriate action to defend ourselves, our lives, our institutions from their nonsense. And we can say that is a bad thing, regardless of whatever the mix of the moral and the psychological consequences are. That's why I highly recommend that you read that article by Ayn Rand, The Psychology of Psychologizing. It is, you cannot use a person's psychology as a moral excuse or as some kind of substitute for judging just the behavior. It really doesn't matter. You wear that swastika, I'm going to take appropriate action for my own sake. He needs to, and you're not doing, by the way, that's just for my benefit, and that's the primary thing here. But by the way, as a footnote, you're not doing that person any favor by not giving him the full consequences and imposing the full consequences. So, accelerating his race to hit rock bottom might be the best thing you can do for him. But that's not my purpose. My purpose is to protect me, my institutions, my life, my business. And you have every right, in fact, you ought to take appropriate steps when someone is that detached from reality for whatever cause.
Yeah, and again, like people are again trying to like put it on like yay, and Chandler brings up a good point, like people like Mel Gibson or Orson Welles, or like you had like people like straight up anti-Semitic like Hollywood actors, right? Even like before. And again, I think this like new wave of anti-Semitism, I think, has much more to do with October 7 than with Ye's comments like a year prior. And again, when it comes to like properly, I think, dealing with this issue, the fact that well, one, what does it say about all the other anti-Semites that one of the sort of biggest person was a literal person who's like psychologically ill, like is a manic episode, and he sounds exactly like the other anti-Semites. I think that might show you a little bit about sort of people's connection to reality. And I think separately, he's somebody who's trying to pull it back. Like who else is actually, who of the other anti-Semites that we have talked about is like trying to go back in like a single way, like not blaming Jews for anything? Is like Candace at any point like trying to reel back her anti-Semitism, or Tucker Carlson, or anybody like who's there who like was anti-Semitic and at some point have said, oh, okay, I've been like like philosophically wrong. Like that's like you don't have anybody, right?
Yeah. And if a person is capable of making a movie, like Mel Gibson, who, that blames the Jews for killing Jesus, say, or if you're able to write a book, like I said, about Adolf Hitler himself, Mein Kampf, if you're able to, like Kanye, write a song, produce a song, okay, we have to presume that those people have a cognitive capacity that's still intact. We really do. My presumption walking in the door, if you're capable of writing a book, producing an album, making a movie, I'm going to treat you as though you are in control of your cognitive capacity and you are morally to blame. Now, I might learn, and the only way to learn is to find out, did they have brain damage? Did they have some psychological issue? But it really wasn't relevant to my evaluation. That was anti-Semitic. It's still anti-Semitic. It's still collectivist. It still has those consequences. But in ordinary life, I'm going to walk around presuming that someone who can write a book, produce a movie, and produce a record album has the capacity that everyone else does. They're using it inappropriately for whatever cause. But my normal presumption is they evaded. They chose exactly, they knew what they were doing in one sense, or they intentionally blanked out, which is the essence of evil, actually. The essence of evil is to mentally blank out on reality, attending to the facts, using your mind appropriately. That is the essence of all immorality. But whether it's a moral question, whether it's a psychological question, to what degree is it of each, that's their business, not mine. I can say wearing the swastika is dangerous, bad, all by itself, and I'm going to react as it the same way as if you're evil. Okay, and if I know it's psychological, I'm going to say go put him in a psychiatric facility for observation for the next 6 months. But when I have a reason to believe that, until that happens, I'm going to presume that people who write books and make movies know what they're doing or could have known better.
Um, Somebody says Tucker Carlson and Kid Zovitz are not feeling consequences. I mean, I don't know what to tell you about that. That's like a materialist view of the world and reality. If you think like Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson are like happy people or people content with their life, I don't really know what to tell you. I mean, they are not. I mean, you cannot be like that much out of touch with reality and yeah, enjoy not to mention both of them are religious, right? So they don't even care about this world that much. So no, I don't think they are feeling the consequences of their actions, which you know, my favorite thing, and I want to write something about it. It's like when people like try to justify some action and saying nobody will know, but your soul will know. You know what you did, and that will always you know, I think I think there's like a little bit like your soul inside of you and a little bit gets cut down whenever you commit to some kind of evil. And at some
You just
point, your soul is beyond repair.
you
And
destroy the integrity of your own mind, and at some point, it's irretrievable. It's irretrievable. I don't know if people are familiar with Les Miserables, the great novel by Victor Hugo. At some point, you get to the point of Javert. My whole life was a giant mistake. You don't want to get into that situation. I mean, there could come some moment of clarity where these people realize, oh my God, I made this huge mistake. But you know, it's all of us who have a responsibility to not sanction those kind of people. It's their millions of followers, you know, and I don't care, you know, what their excuse is. You have a responsibility to make sure that the people that you endorse, whose posts you share, the comments you make about it, the subscriptions that you do on YouTube. You have a moral responsibility yourself. Insofar as you're encouraging and enabling that kind of destructive behavior and that kind of destructive opinion, you are responsible as well. And yeah, to yourself and by yourself, to the extent you destroy the integrity of your own consciousness, you can't be a happy, confident person. I am in no position to evaluate that. But what I do know is to the extent that you destroy the integrity of your own consciousness, you're going to lack confidence, you're going to lack happiness, you're going to have these giant gaps of insecurity, and it will come out in destructive ways. And more than that, too, when you act on it, there are going to be reality is interconnected. You say, I'm going to get away with it because no one caught me. Whoa, that doesn't follow either. Reality is all interconnected. And you actually set a ticking time bomb under your seat when you act immorally, dishonestly. I view it that way. If I were to permit myself one breach of morality, it's like I've cast my feet in concrete and there's a speeding locomotive coming at me at 100 miles an hour. That's the way you have to look at it, ladies and gentlemen. Even one little evasion in your own mind could have ultimately destructive consequences, first on yourself and then on everything around you. You can't disconnect everything. Responsible thought is a process of integration. And it is a moral question how we use our minds and the ideas that we advocate. It's a moral question. Evil amounts to evasion. There is enough brain damage out there that we have to deal with. To induce it in your own mind is a moral issue. That's what makes it so urgently a moral issue. Do not evade. Attend to the facts. Now, I'm not saying, you know, spend 24 hours a day looking up every little fact on every little issue, but I am saying that if it's a relevant issue, you got to think it through. And if you don't, that's a matter of moral responsibility. How we use our minds is the first moral responsibility that every human being has.
yeah, and I would sort of start wrapping this up with basically saying, you know, we have covered this. I'm not calling on like everybody to either like forgive him or now go listen to graduation album because now it's okay. It's this is information. I think when it comes to boycotts, when it comes to what you like, when it comes to evaluating other people, nobody else can do it for you. I mean, everybody has such a unique context of both values and their understanding of other people, not to mention their relationship with other people, right? That they have to, you have to think for yourself. That's the older I get, and I'm not that old, the more I keep finding out that there is really no shortcut to knowledge or understanding of anything. So you have independent mind. You have to think for yourself. I mean, even people who sort of criticize what we said or have different evaluation. Well, that's how you look at it. You don't have to, you have our evaluation as another piece of evidence. And at the end of the day, you have to decide what you want to do, right? That's why we have decided on this channel to at some point stop covering Ye's episodes because we didn't feel it was right. And we felt it was right now because he seems to be taking accountability and seems to be genuine, which I think should be acknowledged. The fact is that, I always say that when it comes to even dealing with like principles or dealing with integrity, it never comes clear cut. People think of corruption or sort of like violations of integrity as something like somebody comes to you and says, unless you sell out the Jews, I will like kill you. And like, oh, that's the moment where you can keep your integrity. No, it's usually, are you going to gym today? You
Yeah.
promise to yourself that you will go to gym. That is an act of integrity that you are committed, and that's usually when like principles come into actions. It is in these little decisions. It will never be like one big decision that now it decides if you're a good or a bad person. No, it's everyday life that you
You bring up
make that
physical
decision.
health. The same applies to mental health. Am I ingesting poison? That's sort of easy and straightforward. When you ingest mental poison, the point I'm making here, and we have a lot of mental poison out there, and people are taking it and taking it without even thinking that it might be mental poison. I'm not calling for government action here. I'm calling for individual responsibility. It is, if taking physical poison is bad, taking mental poison can be just as dangerous and even worse.
Well, we have a super chat from Daniel. Thank you so much. He says, "New remix just dropped. No church in the wild, but maybe a synagogue." Is that like a song that came out, or maybe somebody can post me in the chat? No church, but maybe a synagogue. It might be. I can quickly look it up. James, do you have any last thoughts from you? And where can people
No.
find you?
Well, my last mental thought is take care of your own mental health. And that begins with taking care of your own mind, what you accept as true and false. And the most important subject under the sun is philosophy. So take your philosophy seriously. Take seriously how you use your mind. What qualifies as truth for you? That is the first and overwhelmingly most important responsibility you have to yourself, because that is the only way you can evaluate both your physical and mental health and well being. For your own well being, it is critical that you use your mind responsibly. You can find me here at the Ayn Rand Center UK. You can also find me over at Facebook, James Stevens Valiant, where I'm answering questions almost every day.
So I looked it up, and Daniel also posted it. No Church in the Wild is actually a Kanye West song together with Jay-Z. I also like Jay-Z, so both of these are, when it comes to concerning rap, I think they are one of the greatest, or at least recognized as greatest people in that specific art form. So I think that like alone, like, because I've seen somebody earlier said like Ye is not relevant in music, which I think is like insane to bring up. I mean, he is like one of the most influential people in that specific like genre. Trying to ignore that, even if you maybe don't consider rap whatever like the purest art form or whatever, I think it's still very much recognizable and
No
deserves
comment.
acknowledgement.
I'm of a different generation. No comment.
Yeah, but even as a different generation, I don't know what would be like a biggest musician in sort of your times. But yeah, like taking
Well,
that
you
musician
covered
and
Roger Waters yesterday.
that's fair.
As a teenager, I was listening to that madman's. See, I call him a madman. That's not. There's no excuse for his behavior. But I was listening to Pink Floyd when I was a teenager.
Yeah, and like in a sense, like trying to take away from that now the influence of Pink Floyd music from then and what that influence, right? And trying to like erase it because of what he says now, I think it's kind of ridiculous.
Right.
Not to mention, I think,
No
yeah, he has,
excuse.
yeah. Um, well, with that, uh, we said, oh, you can find me on my YouTube channel, Damned Dan. The links to everybody's are going to be in the description. Thank you, James, for joining me today. Thank you, everybody, for watching, and bye bye.
Be safe.